Hi everyone, Jim here. In this video I'm going to show you how I digitally color my sketches using a very beginner-friendly method. It's not difficult and I'll show you step by step. One of the nice things about this method is you can use your original pencil sketches. No need to redraw the line art digitally. This is a real fun way that you can color all of your sketches. So the basic steps are: 1. Create a selection layer of the entire figure. It's important to do a good job on this and be careful when you color the edges. Then create separate selection layers for the hair, the costume, and the eyes, and any other major section of the drawing. Next we'll create shadow layers for each selection layer. And then we're going to create highlight layers for each selection layer. And finally we'll create the background and character shadow. Then you can just relax and enjoy your art. So grab your pencil, let's get started. So I'm using Photoshop, but you can use any software to follow along. So depending on the sketch I'm coloring, there are a few things I will do to clean up and prepare my sketch before I start the coloring process. If the sketch is muddy or just has a lot of unwanted smudges or marks on it, I will open up the Levels app inside of Photoshop and try to clean the sketch up. Press Ctrl L for levels and experiment with the sliders till you get the best result. It won't be perfect, but you should be able to eliminate some of the noise on your sketch. Another thing I do is if my sketch is too light, then I will duplicate the sketch layer. Just right click on it and duplicate your sketch, and then set the new layer to a multiply blend mode. And then you can use the new layer's opacity setting to adjust the darkness of the two layers. Finally, what I'll do is I will create a new layer by merging the two sketch layers. Now I didn't do this in this video, but you should probably make copies of all your layers or new layers and keep them in a separate folder in case you make mistakes or delete something by accident. I'd rather be safe than sorry. And before we go any further, this is the most important thing to remember to do when working digitally. Save your work often. Let me tell you a little story. When I was first starting out using Photoshop, I was working on a piece for 6 hours and I was almost done, and then the power in the city went out for like half of a second and I lost everything because I hadn't been saving. I was so upset. So I stayed up all night and redid the piece. Now this is the piece I was working on, the Griffin. And I'll tell you, I was so happy when it was finally done and saved and printed. Anyway, when I was working on it the second time, I was hitting Ctrl+S every time I made a new line or made a new layer. I was saving so often it was ridiculous. But it was really good too, because I never forgot to save after that, and I often told that story when I was teaching young people how to use digital software. Also, another little tip is make sure you know where you're saving your file to. Sometimes you think you're saving it to the right location and something has happened and you're saving it somewhere where you might have a really hard time finding it. So just make sure you know where you're saving it to. Now take your new line art layer and change the layer's blending mode to multiply so it will show through all the other layers. Next, clean up your artwork by erasing any unwanted lines or marks that you don't want in your finished piece. Once you have cleaned up your sketch, lock the layers so you don't accidentally color on it or erase your sketch. Now the next thing we want to do is to create our main selection layer, and this is the whole foundation to coloring your art digitally. So create a new layer and call it selection layer. Drag it underneath your line art layer and make sure your line art layer's blend mode is set to multiply, and then lock your line art layer so we don't mess it up. Finally, we're ready to start coloring our artwork. By the way, I like to use a hard round brush to create my selection layers so I get a clean, crisp edge to select. Now you can use any color for your selection layer, but I always use the skin color of my character so I don't have to change color later. And if there are any gaps in my hair layers, then there won't be some weird color showing through. So I recommend using your character's skin color if you are indeed doing a character. So here I'm staying zoomed out and I'm just using a smaller brush and just doing the bigger areas of the character. And one little tip is lift your brush every once in a while, so if you need to erase or If you need to do Control Z to undo, you don't have to undo your whole character. Once I get it filled in, then I'll zoom in and with a smaller brush start to, work right up towards the edges of the line art. And sometimes you have to make guesses. If there's a gap in your line art, you're just going to have to figure out how you're going to color in your character. So zooming in here, I'm just doing details on the hair. Every once in a while I'll go over the line and I have to switch to my eraser, but it's no big deal. And take your time, though this is sped up obviously a little bit. Just take your time, have some fun, sip your tea or favorite drink. Well, this guaranteed is the most important thing, so when you're working on your main selection layer, really be careful to get right up to the edge on every section so that it's filled in with your selection layer color right up to the edge, so no little white specks show through. Especially when you put in a background and stuff, you don't want little white dots showing through, or little white areas where you've forgotten to get close to the edge of your line art. And here I'm just doing a little bit more cleanup. Sometimes I'll switch back to the line art itself and just clean up a little bit of the line art. But remember to go back to your selection layer to color and relock your line art so you're not coloring on the line art. I've done that so many times and it's so frustrating. So just make sure you're working color on your selection layer and keep that line art layer locked. So when I'm doing the hair here, I have to make sure I do a real careful selection around the face. Once you've got the outline of the face done, then you can just control click your selection layer, but color on your new hair selection layer. And that way you don't have to worry about going out of the edges when you're coloring the hair. So that's a really important thing to learn how to do, is to control click your whole selection layer when coloring on a new selection layer. So now we're going to repeat the process. We're going to control click the main selection area, and we're going to color in on a new layer called costume selection layer. And when I'm working on the outer edge of the character, I don't have to worry about the paint spilling over. But when I'm going up against the character's skin, I have to be really careful not to go over the line art, go over the lines of the costume. So again, you can start by being zoomed out and just getting the main areas filled in with a big brush, but then you're going to have to zoom in to do more detailed work. When see, I've gone over the edge there, so I just did an undo, but now I'm going to zoom in and make my brush smaller so I can work these areas close to the skin. Requires a bit of patience, and sometimes you have to resize your brush if you get into a tight spot, but it's just part of the process, and actually it's a lot of fun. This part doesn't take a lot of mental energy so much as patience. And sometimes I'll use shift click technique, so I can click and then hold down the shift button and then aim for a new area, and it just creates straight lines of color. It really helps me to do lines that are either straight or close to being straight. So you click, hold down shift, click again, and boy, this really saves a lot of time. Once you have the outer edge done, then you can just make your brush bigger or just quickly fill in these areas. So shift clicking is a really great technique. So now it's just a matter of finishing up the job of filling in the costume, and I'm not doing anything special here. Just checking to see if there's any little things I should clean up, and bam, there we go. Costume flats is pretty much done. And yeah, don't forget to save. So there are so many ways you can shade a character. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a little experiment where I'm taking the complementary color of the costume and using it to shade the character. And that might not be the most common way to shade a character, but I wanted to give it a try because I saw somebody else do it, and it works okay. It's kind of cool. Gives it a distinctive style or flavor. So just use your imagination and try to think of all the places where light won't be hitting directly. And I'm assuming the light's coming from the top left corner of the scene. So yeah, anywhere where I think light might not get into very easily, that's where I'm going to shade. And I don't really have a perfect system, but I just, like I say, use my imagination, and sometimes I just make stuff up if it looks cool. Okay? So I don't think any light's getting into that armpit area. And then just trying to establish a bit of shading and shadows on the hair there. So bam, there we go. And then what I do is I lighten up the opacity on the layer and blend that shadow in. Looks nice. So now I'm creating a second shading layer for the skin, and I'm also using a blending mode on this layer, and I'm just shading in anywhere where I think there might be more shadows on the skin layer. And here I'm just trying to follow along any anatomy lines that might be showing through the skin. And like I say, I'm just experimenting a little bit, and you can too. Don't feel like you have to do what I do. Use your imagination and don't be afraid to try stuff. You can always undo when you're doing work digitally. That's the beauty of working digitally. And another thing to take note of is that I'm just doing for me this is just a general sketch. I'm not trying to make anything perfect or a fully rendered, beautiful, realistic drawing here. I'm just keeping it more of a cartoon, comic book kind of feel. So I created a new multiply layer for the eye details, and here you can see I'm putting in the eye whites. And then I'm just painting right on the same layer. I'm putting in the iris, the blue color. And then I don't think I've changed the blending mode yet, but I will shortly, and change it to multiply so the eyes blend in. So I wasn't completely happy with the shading I'd done earlier on the hair, so what I'm doing now is I'm going back over it with the actual hair color using a multiply blend mode. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer and actually use a lighter mid-tone shading so I get 2 tones over that hair. So notice I'm shifting the color slightly when I want to do these darker shadows, and I'm also using a hard round brush to do this. I'm not trying to make anything really feathered or realistic. I want nice hard lines to go with this comic book style work that I'm doing here. So yeah, just trying to make some dark places in the hair. And now I'm going to create a new layer and put in some lighter shadows. So it's kind of like a mid-tone is what I'm going for now. So make this new layer. Name it Hair Shadows 2. And I make a multiply layer. I turn it in, I make sure the blending mode is on multiply. But the thing I forgot to do was to change the opacity of the brush, so I want it a little lighter so these midtones aren't as dark as the dark areas, of course. So now I'm creating a new layer for the hair highlights, and I'm setting this layer's blending mode to screen. And I'm just using the hair selection layer to make sure I don't go outside of the hair area. And just making some bands of light where I think there might be highlights on the hair. That's looking good. Hey everyone, if this is making sense so far, drop a like. It helps these tutorials reach more artists. So my first idea for a background was to create a simple background using the complementary color to the red costume layer. a deep teal, or sometimes called dark teal or blue-green teal. If you want the same color, the hex code number is 10817F. So I just made a new layer over my original white background layer and used the paint bucket to fill it in. So next I'm going to create her swinging rope on a separate layer. And if you need to recolor it, just control click the layer and then you don't have to worry about going outside the edges of the rope. Now I'm putting in another shading layer set to multiply. I'm going to call it suit shadow layer, and I'm going to put it over the costume layer, and I'm choosing a darker red closer to a purple or a rose color, and I'm adding in shading where I think it's needed. This time I'm using a soft round brush with opacity set to 39. I frequently use an opacity setting between 15 and 40% depending on the piece of art I'm working on. I really felt there needed to be some shading under her capette and in other areas. So creating the character shadow layer is always a fun thing for me to do. All you need to do is make a copy of your finished character, and in this case I include her rope, and then I fill in that new layer with a solid color and place the new layer under your character layer. Then you just resize it, offset it to the original character, to the left or the right, up or down, how you see, wherever you want the shadow to fall. And finally, reduce the opacity of the new layer so it blends into your background, and voila, instant shadow. In this final section, I'm going to add in some final shading and lighting to the character, show you a new red, yellow, blue background, create and use halftones, and finally use a bunch of layer blending modes to create many lighting variations of the final image. I was debating whether to teach these techniques or just show them to you, and I decided to just quickly show them to you as this video is getting pretty long right now. If you'd like me to create a separate video on how I create and use halftones, just message me halftone video in the comments. And likewise, if you'd like to see how I experiment with blending modes, just drop blending modes in the comments. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and till the next video drops, keep drawing.